Distance and disconnection are not the same thing. That distinction is worth holding carefully because the avoidance characteristic distance, the withdrawal, the cooling, the managed reduction of engagement that follows genuine closeness, tends to be read as the evidence of disconnection, as the signal that the interior has not maintained what the warmer moments suggested was present. But distance is a behavior. Disconnection is an interior condition. And in the avoidant dynamic, the behavior and the interior can point in entirely different directions simultaneously. The avoidant who has genuinely bonded to someone does not stop being bonded because the distance has been established. The bonding is an interior event, was established before the management could prevent it, persists in the interior regardless of what the behavioral management is producing on the surface. What changes when the distance is created is the expression of the bonding, not the bonding itself. Understanding the signs that bonding has occurred, even in the presence of the behavioral distance that the avoidance pattern produces, is genuinely useful for accurate reading of the dynamic, not as the foundation for remaining in insufficient conditions indefinitely, but as the honest, clear-eyed understanding of what is actually present versus what the behavior is suggesting is present. The first sign is something that tends to be felt before it is consciously identified. The quality of the avoidance attention when they are present is different with someone they have bonded to than with someone they have not. Not warmer, necessarily. The management may be keeping the warmth regulated. Not more expressive, the defense may be limiting the expression, but different in a quality that is felt rather than observed. The specific precognitive, this person is actually here quality of someone whose interior is genuinely engaged rather than pleasantly present. The difference is subtle. It shows in the specific focus of the attention during actual interaction. The avoidant who is bonded tends to be more precisely attentive, tracking the specific content of what the person is saying, rather than the general direction of the conversation. Responding to the actual texture of what is expressed, rather than the surface form of it. Noticing things that a less engaged person would not notice, not because they are trying to demonstrate attentiveness, but because the genuine interior engagement makes the noticing natural. This quality of attention is one of the more reliable signs of genuine bonding, because it is difficult to perform consistently. The performing of attention has a specific quality that distinguishes it from genuine attention, a slightly surface-level quality, a tendency to respond to the form rather than the substance, a reliability in certain expected moments and absence in the unexpected ones. Genuine attention is more consistent across conditions and more precise in its quality because it is not being deliberately maintained, but simply reflecting the genuine interior engagement that the bonding produces. The second sign is the specific quality of the avoidance humor with someone they have bonded to. Humor is one of the more revealing registers of genuine interior connection because it requires a particular kind of shared understanding to land. The specific inside reference quality of humor that develops between two people who have been genuinely attending to each other, the joke that only works because of something said 3 conversations ago, the reference that requires genuine retention of the specific texture of previous exchanges. That kind of humor does not develop in the absence of genuine interior engagement. The avoidant who has bonded to someone tends to develop this specific humor with them, not the generic anyone could get this quality of social humor, the specifically between these two people quality of humor that requires genuine mutual attention as its precondition. This is a sign that is easy to miss, precisely because humor tends to be framed as the light thing, the casual thing, the evidence of comfortable ease, rather than genuine depth. But the specific, reference-dependent, requires genuine mutual attention quality of inside humor is the evidence of something that has been building in the avoidance interior. The ongoing, sustained, even in the absence of direct contact, retention of the other person's specific qualities and the specific texture of previous genuine exchanges. The third sign is the avoidance response to the person's difficulty, not the obvious response. Not the dramatic demonstration of concern or the explicit expression of care that the avoidance architecture typically prevents from occurring in those direct forms. The specific, small, this is different from how I respond to others quality of slightly increased attentiveness when the person is going through something difficult. The avoidant who is not bonded to someone responds to that person's difficulty with the appropriate social expressions of concern, the standard forms of acknowledgement, and the generic expressions of support that the social script provides. These are genuine in their way, but they are not specific, are not organized around the particular person and what their particular difficulty actually means, given the avoidant's genuine knowledge of who they are. The avoidant who has bonded responds differently. The attentiveness increases slightly. The questions become more specific, organized around the actual situation of the actual person, rather than the generic situation the difficulty represents. The follow-up, in subsequent interactions, references the specific thing rather than the generic category. The avoidant checks in, however obliquely, in a way that reveals that the person's difficulty has been present in the avoidant's interior between the interactions, rather than being processed and set aside as completed social engagement. That presence, the other person's specific situation continuing to be held in the avoidant's interior between interactions, is the bonding expressing itself in one of its most characteristic forms. The ongoing interior engagement with the specific person, rather than the social interaction being complete in itself. The fourth sign is how the avoidant handles disagreement with someone they have bonded to. The avoidant who has not bonded to someone tends to handle disagreement through one of two mechanisms. Either the smooth social management of it, the graceful redirection that prevents the disagreement from becoming real conflict without genuinely engaging with the difference of perspective. Or the more pronounced avoidant response of simply stepping away from the interaction that is producing friction, reducing engagement rather than staying with the difficulty of genuine disagreement. The avoidant who has bonded to someone handles disagreement differently. Not perfectly, not with the full, mature, conflict as opportunity quality of someone who has developed genuine capacity for relational repair, but with the specific, this matters enough to stay with quality of someone whose bonding makes the relationship worth the discomfort of not simply exiting the friction. They might push back, might actually express a different perspective rather than smoothing the surface, might engage with the disagreement as the genuine difference between two people who are actually in contact, rather than as the social friction to be managed or avoided. The willingness to stay with disagreement, even imperfectly, even with the characteristic avoidant difficulty, is one of the clearest behavioral signs of genuine bonding, because staying with disagreement requires the assessment that the relationship is worth the discomfort of the staying. And that assessment reflects what the interior actually contains about the person, which is the specific, genuine, this matters quality of genuine bonding, rather than the pleasant but manageable quality of ordinary connection. The fifth sign requires the most careful attention to detect, because it is the most thoroughly overlaid with the management's efforts to contain it. It is the specific quality of what surfaces in the avoidance communication immediately after moments of genuine contact. Genuine contact, the moments when something real passes between the two people, when the connection is most honestly itself, when the avoidance interior is most directly in touch with the person, rather than managing the encounter from behind a defense, tends to be followed by a specific kind of movement in the avoidance communication. Sometimes the movement is toward humor, the joke that arrives right after the genuine moment, that has the specific quality of someone who felt something real and is redirecting through levity before the feeling becomes too present. Sometimes the movement is toward the practical, the sudden reference to something logistical or concrete that shifts the conversation from the genuine territory it was just inhabiting towards something more manageable. Sometimes the movement is simply a subtle increase in the pace of the communication, a quickening that has the quality of someone who was in genuine territory and is moving through it faster than the genuine territory warrants. Each of these movements is the management reasserting itself after the genuine contact, and the specific quality of what the management is responding to, the fact that genuine contact occurred and the management needed to address it, is itself the sign of bonding. The management responds most actively to what presses most genuinely against the defended interior. The post contact movement reveals, through the necessity of the response, that what just happened pressed genuinely. These 5 signs, the quality of specific attention, the development of particular humor, the response to difficulty, the willingness to stay with disagreement, and the post contact movement, are not the dramatic declarations of attachment that ordinary relational logic would predict. They are the subtle, indirect because direct is not available, expressions of genuine interior bonding in a psychology that has been organized around the prevention of its direct expression. Reading them accurately requires the specific quality of attention that this entire conversation has been pointing toward. Not the hope-colored attention that wants to find confirmation of the bonding everywhere. Not the hurt-colored attention that dismisses every signal as insufficient or manipulative. The honest, clear-eyed, actually attending attention of someone who is simply present to what is actually there. What is actually there when genuine bonding has occurred is considerable, is real, is the specific, interior, genuinely felt attachment of a person whose defended psychology fell toward someone it could not prevent itself from falling toward. And what is also there, equally real, equally honest, equally deserving of clear-eyed acknowledgement, is the gap between the interior bonding and its adequate behavioral expression. The architecture that was there before the bonding occurred, and that continues to prevent the bonding from becoming what it deserves to become in behavior. Both things real, both things worth seeing clearly, neither canceling the other. The bonding genuine, the expression insufficient, the gap the avoidant's own frontier. And the person's life, complete, genuine, forward-moving, fully inhabitable, continuing in full, regardless of what the avoidant does with the frontier that is entirely theirs to navigate. In the ordinary days. That have always been the whole of it. The 5 signs described, the quality of specific attention, the particular humor, the response to difficulty, the willingness to stay with disagreement, the post-contact movement, are real indicators worth understanding. What deserves honest examination now is what a person does with the accurate reading of them. Because there is a specific risk in becoming skilled at reading bonding signals in someone who acts distant. The risk is that the skill itself becomes the reason to stay. That the accurate perception of genuine interior attachment becomes the justification for continued investment in a dynamic whose behavioral reality remains insufficient. That knowing the bonding is real substitutes for receiving the adequate expression of it. That substitution is worth naming directly, because the person who can read the bonding signals accurately is also the person most vulnerable to a particular form of the dynamic's pull. The pull of being the one who understands, who sees clearly what is happening in the avoidance interior, who knows the distance is not disconnection, and the management is not indifference, and the architecture is preventing something genuinely real from finding its adequate form. That understanding is true, and it is not the same as the adequate expression of the bonding finding its way into the ordinary days. The accurate reading of bonding signals answers one question clearly. It answers the question of whether the avoidant has genuinely connected with the person, whether something real is present in the interior, whether the distance is the architecture's response to genuine attachment, rather than the natural settling of a connection that was never particularly deep. The accurate reading does not answer the question that actually determines the quality of the person's experience of the dynamic. That question is not whether genuine bonding occurred. It is what the genuine bonding is producing in behavior, in the ordinary days, in the quality of the engagement across the unremarkable hours that constitute the actual texture of being in a connection with someone. The bonding can be completely, genuinely real, confirmed by every signal described in this script, and the behavioral reality of the dynamic can still be insufficient, can still be organized around the pattern's defaults, can still be producing the characteristic avoidant texture of warmth that is intermittent, presence that is managed, showing up that is concentrated in the motivated moments rather than sustained across the ordinary ones. The bonding being real does not make the behavioral insufficiency adequate, does not change what the person is actually receiving in the daily lived reality of the connection, does not transform the experience of loving someone whose genuine interior attachment cannot find adequate behavioral form into the experience of being loved adequately. This matters for a specific practical reason. The person who is reading the bonding signals accurately, who can feel the specific quality of the avoidant's genuine attention, who can detect the particular humor that genuine bonding produces, who can recognize the subtle post-contact movement as the evidence of genuine interior engagement, that person is also, in reading those signals, spending their own considerable perceptual capacity on the interpretation of another person's interior. That expenditure is real, takes genuine attentional resources, resources that are being directed outward, toward the detection and interpretation of the avoidance signals, rather than inward, toward the person's own genuine interior and the genuine life that deserves those resources. The irony is specific. The more skilled the person becomes at reading the avoidance bonding signals, the more of their attention is organized around the avoidance interior as its primary concern. The very skill that provides accurate understanding also provides the ongoing occasion for the attention to remain outwardly directed toward the question of what the avoidant is actually experiencing. That ongoing occasion is worth being honest about. Not as the reason to abandon the perceptual skill, accurate understanding is genuinely valuable, but as the reminder that the skill serves the person most when it is used to arrive at the clear-eyed assessment that allows a genuine decision, rather than being used as the ongoing practice of someone who is still primarily organized around the avoidance interior. The accurate reading serves the person when it produces clarity, when it answers the question of what is actually present with sufficient honesty that the person can make a genuine decision about what to do with that information. It does not serve the person when it becomes the ongoing occupation of the interior, the continued monitoring of the avoidance signals as the primary activity of the attention, rather than as the occasional, honest, clear-eyed assessment that allows informed choice. The distinction between those two uses of the perceptual skill is worth holding clearly, and it requires the honest answer to a genuine question. Is the reading of the bonding signals being used to arrive at clarity, or is it being used to maintain orientation toward the avoidant as the primary concern of the interior? That question is not comfortable. It is possible to be using the accurate reading, genuinely accurate, not self-deceived about the signals themselves, in the service of the continued orientation, rather than in the service of genuine clarity, to be correctly identifying the bonding while using the correct identification as the reason to remain in conditions whose behavioral reality does not warrant the continued investment. The honest answer to that question is available, not from the analysis of the signals, but from the honest consultation of the body. From the genuine, unhedged, what is actually true for me question about what the dynamic is costing and what it is returning. About whether the accurate knowledge that genuine bonding is present is making the ordinary experience of the dynamic genuinely nourishing, or is simply making the insufficient experience feel more justified. If the accurate knowledge of the bonding is producing genuine nourishment, if the dynamic, despite the distance, is providing something that genuinely sustains the person rather than depleting them, that is information worth having honestly. If the accurate knowledge of the bonding is primarily functioning as the justification for remaining in conditions whose daily reality is depleting, if the knowing the bonding is real is the reason for staying, rather than the staying being independently warranted by what the dynamic is actually providing, that is also information worth having, honestly. The bonding signs are real, worth knowing, worth reading accurately rather than misreading in either the hope-inflated or hurt-deflated direction. And they are one piece of information among several that deserve honest, simultaneous consideration. The bonding is real. What is the behavioral expression producing in the ordinary days? The distance is the architecture's response to the bonding. Is the architecture changing through genuine work, or is it remaining the dominant condition? The avoidant has genuinely connected. Is that connection finding the form that allows it to be something the person actually receives, or is it remaining interior to the avoidant and therefore effectively unavailable to the person it is directed toward? Those questions, held alongside the accurate reading of the bonding signals, produce the full picture. The complete, honest, neither inflated nor deflated picture of what is actually present and what is actually available. The full picture is what genuine decisions deserve to be made from, not the partial picture of the bonding signals alone, which confirms the real feeling while leaving aside the question of its expression. Not the partial picture of the behavioral distance alone, which suggests disconnection without accounting for the genuine interior reality. The full picture, both things, the bonding and its insufficient expression, the genuine interior and the inadequate behavioral reality, the real love and the real gap between that love and what the person actually receives. Holding the full picture is the ongoing practice, not a single achievement, but the daily, patient, honest return to the complete account of what is true, rather than the comfortable partial account. The complete account does not make easy decisions, does not resolve the dynamic into obvious clarity. It holds the genuine complexity of something that is genuinely complex, real bonding and real insufficiency, genuine interior love and genuine behavioral inadequacy, without requiring the complexity to simplify before the person is permitted to respond to it. The response to genuine complexity is not always obvious, is not always the same for every person in every circumstance. It belongs to the specific person, in their specific conditions, with their specific understanding of what their life actually requires. But it is made most honestly from the full picture, not from the bonding signals alone, not from the distance alone, from both, held simultaneously, with the honesty that the complete account requires. And from that honest holding of the complete account, whatever the genuine response actually is, staying with clear eyes, moving forward with clear eyes, waiting with defined structure, or the quiet, honest conclusion that the insufficient expression is the relevant fact, regardless of the genuine interior, that response has the integrity of genuine choice, made from genuine information about what is actually present and what the person's actual life actually requires, which has always been the most important question, and which remains so in the ordinary days. That are the whole of it. The complete account, both the bonding and its insufficient expression, does not become easier to hold simply because it has been arrived at honestly. That is worth acknowledging. The honest holding of complexity is not a destination that, once reached, maintains itself without continued effort. It is the ongoing practice described throughout this conversation, daily, sometimes more demanding than other times, requiring the continued, patient return to what is actually true, rather than the partial version that either hope or hurt would prefer. What makes the ongoing practice sustainable? What keeps it from becoming the exhausting, effortful maintenance of a position that the person is working against themselves to hold is the genuine inhabitation of the life alongside it, the two things together, the honest holding of the complete account about the avoidant, and the genuine, absorbed, actually nourishing engagement with the person's own actual life. Without the genuine inhabitation of the life, the honest holding of the complete account becomes the primary interior activity, becomes the thing the attention is doing, which converts the honest holding from the clear-eyed position it is meant to be into another form of organization around the avoidance interior as the primary concern. With the genuine inhabitation of the life, the honest holding finds its appropriate place, is present when it is relevant, when the dynamic requires genuine assessment, when a signal arrives that deserves honest reading, when a decision needs to be made from accurate information, and is not the primary interior activity in the hours when the genuine life is simply being lived. The genuine inhabitation of the life, alongside the honest holding of the complete account, produces something specific over time. not the dramatic resolution of the complexity into clarity, not the sudden disappearance of the genuine feeling or the obvious decision that the dynamic's ambiguity has been preventing. It produces the gradual shift in the ratio of interior resources allocated to the avoidant dynamic versus interior resources genuinely available for the person's own life. That ratio changes slowly, not through a single significant decision that reorganizes everything at once, through the accumulated, ordinary, unremarkable days of genuine inhabitation gradually becoming more of the interior's experience than the monitoring and the signal reading and the hoping and the honest holding of complexity. The genuine inhabitation expands. The dynamic occupies a smaller proportion of the available interior space, not because it has been suppressed or resolved, but because other things are genuinely growing into the space that is available to them when the inhabitation is real. The interests that receive fuller attention produce genuine engagement that is its own reward. The friendships that receive fuller presence develop into something richer than they were during the dynamic's most consuming phase. The creative or professional or intellectual pursuits that receive more genuine absorption produce the specific, sustaining satisfaction of genuine engagement, rather than the partial satisfaction of someone who is present with half their attention elsewhere. These growths are not compensations for the dynamic's insufficiency. They are the genuine content of a genuine life being genuinely lived, and they are what the ratio shift is made of. The accumulated, organic, not requiring dramatic decision expansion of genuine inhabitation into the interior space that was previously being consumed by the dynamic's management. There is something that happens in the avoidance experience of someone whose interior ratio is shifting in this way, something worth naming honestly, because it is one of the more counterintuitive aspects of the dynamic. The avoidant tends to notice the shift before they can name what they are noticing, registers it as the specific, precognitive, this is different quality of encountering someone whose interior is increasingly genuinely elsewhere rather than organized around the connection as its primary concern. This registration does not necessarily produce a behavioral response, does not automatically generate the reaching that the shift might seem to invite. The avoidance system is not a simple input-output mechanism, where the detection of reduced availability automatically produces increased pursuit. What it produces is more interior than behavioral. The specific, uncomfortable, this requires genuine attention quality of a system whose background assumptions are being quietly contradicted. The person was previously calibrated, held in the model as someone whose interior was consistently oriented toward the connection. The shift contradicts that calibration, requires the model to update. Model updates are uncomfortable for the avoidance system in a specific way. They require the genuine engagement with what the update means, with what the changed conditions imply about the connection, and about the avoidant's own contribution to the conditions that produce the change. That genuine engagement is the closest available thing to the honest reckoning the dynamic has been pointing toward throughout this conversation. It does not arrive as a dramatic event, as the quiet, persistent, requires genuine attention quality of a system that can no longer run on its previous assumptions, without the evidence contradicting those assumptions in increasingly undeniable ways. Whether the genuine engagement with the model update produces anything in the avoidance behavior is, as always, the avoidant's own question, their own interior to navigate, their own genuine choosing about whether the honest engagement with the update produces the genuine work that the gap between interior bonding and adequate behavioral expression requires. That question is not the person's to answer, is not even the person's to monitor with any particular ongoing attention. The person's attention belongs to the life, the genuine, forward-moving, increasingly fully inhabited life that the ratio shift is producing, and that the continued genuine engagement is deepening. The bonding signals are real, have been accurately described, are worth understanding honestly. The life is also real, more immediately present, more directly available to the person's genuine inhabitation, more immediately responsive to the quality of attention the person brings to it. The bonding signals speak to what is real in the avoidance interior. The life speaks to what is real in the person's own. Both real. The person has genuine access to only one of them from the inside, their own, the one that is always already happening. In the ordinary days that are the whole of it, and that continue to be worth the full, genuine, uncompromised quality of the person's complete presence, right now, without waiting for the bonding to find its adequate form. Without organizing the days around the question of whether it will, simply living, completely, in what is genuinely here, which has always been enough.